r/AskReddit. Flight attendants of Reddit. What do the passengers not know?
Claim your free AirPods today by clicking the first link in the description down below.
I'm a flight attendant. So many incidents occur on the plane that everyday passengers don't see or consider. My last flight, an elderly man accidentally hid on the floor, stepped in it, and walked on like it was nothing. Do not walk around barefoot. Pee and poop happens all over. I feel like I witness an accident regularly in their seat or in the lav. People get nosebleeds or their wounds open. Obviously when we land, it is thoroughly cleaned. But in flight our resources are limited. Don't change your baby's diaper on the tray table. This also happens all the time. It's unsanitary and people use the tray table to eat, put their personal things on, etc. Lastly, it is not the responsibility of a flight attendant to lift your bag. There are multiple injuries caused from flight attendants lifting heavy bags to be friendly. And then they are out of a job for months to a year, on average. If you pack it, you lift it. If it's too heavy for you, it's too heavy for us. Happy flying. Yaddle. On a Delta flight a few months ago, I sat down and my seatbelt felt wet. I smelled my hands and vomit. I asked the flight attendant if someone had thrown up in the seat before me, and she said I'm sorry. I watched them clean it up 3 times. Disgusted, I asked for a different seat. Nope. Full flight. Couldn't take a later. Because we had my son and it was getting late. So, went to unbuckle my seat and little pieces of vomit fell out from the buckle onto my lap. Yup. Delta Airlines. Washed my hands. They gave me 10k bonus miles and kept me sufficiently drunk on the flight that my wife had to drive home. I did shower as soon as I walked in the door and threw my clothes in the wash. Still amazed at that one. Considering I was told by a former plane crew that replacing seat belts and seat cushions is a pretty quick and painless process. Edit. Wow. This blew up. Some background info. Was a Delta flight out of Midway to Atlanta. Midway is not a hub. Atlanta is. I never was scared of any biohazard issues. I tend to think that most viruses and bacteria die after leaving a body host for some time. Of course I'm not a science major. It nerd here. So I'm sure someone can correct me on that. But that's why I wasn't concerned at the time. You all have changed that. I was wearing jeans. But I'm sure if I had on shorts and someone's partially digested Thai food landed on my leg, I might have freaked out. And some credit to the flight crew for being as accommodating and nice as possible. Edit 2. Wow. Okay. So I could have contracted Ebola from this vomit. Thanks. That's brutal. I would have demanded it be cleaned up before you occupied that seat. Any sort of human fluid is a biohazard. I'm an airline pilot. We keep a few extra seat belts in the flight deck hold to replace them if they get soiled. How much the pilots sleep. If it ranges in either extremes, that's worrying. Duck dude, you've got me all types of worried right now. WTF. I was cabin crew for 5 years long haul only, and whilst we've all passed the exams and tests and blah 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 and have a refresher every year, you never really know how anyone will react in any kind of emergency. Firemen and police are tested on a weekly basis. But in the 5 years I was crew, there was nothing I personally experienced that put any of the proper training into use. And I'd like to think I'd not freeze or fall to pieces. But you just never know. So definitely pay a bit of attention for the 3 minimums of the safety demo and figure out where the nearest exit and its alternative are, because you never know. You might end up having to help yourself. Edit. I will also wager the knowledge of flight attendants on this thread shall be turned into a Daily Mail news article for tomorrow. You'd be surprised how effective training is. In case of an emergency, the part of your brain that makes you human kinda shuts off and you go into autopilot. In that case, you default to how you were trained. Also your fingers get numb, and you get tunnel vision. Source: military. We don't rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. Archilicious. As a former aviation journalist, I can tell you a few things. Yes. On transoceanic flights there is a cabin for crew to get some sleep. No. You won't be invited in for fun times. On some newer planes there's also a hold for people who have died on the flight. No. You won't be invited in for fun times either. If you piss off the cabin crew they will fart on you. The pressure on aircraft makes you naturally gassy, and it's easy to puff one off in the face of an annoying jet while bending down to speak to someone on the opposite side of the aisle. If a meal service is on offer, go for the kosher option, so you know it was prepared that day. If a meal service is on offer, go for the kosher option, so you know it was prepared that day. I hadn't thought of that. Thank you. The old fake Jew fresh food trick. I dated a flight attendant for a while. One thing I haven't seen mentioned is that sometimes delays are caused by flight attendants not showing up and the airline scrambling to get a backup scheduled. Like a flight attendant was partying too hard last night and decided to call off 2 hours before that $1,500 cross-ocean flight you just popped on. She loved to party, as did a lot of her coworkers, and were often hungover or out of it on flights. Even though pay was it, their union made it very hard to get fired, so call-offs were kind of no big deal. This is what I don't understand about modern business mentality. Is it that hard to understand that if you pay a decent wage, you'll get better employees? In turn, your customers will be happier and will frequent your business more often. I'm at the point that I'd rather drive 8-12 hours than take a plane because of how miserable the experience is. It's so true. The company I work for is having a brutal time finding and keeping decent new hires. The problem is completely obvious to me. They are trying to hire people at half the pay rate I got when I started. Nobody seems to understand that the quality of applicants is directly correlated to pay. If you pay it, you're gonna get it employees. Former flight attendant here. Keep your shoes on. Keep your shoes on. The floor is so filthy it's ridiculous. And that isn't water you are feeling. Also, if you ask to be upgraded to a better seat in economy, we will have you pay. However, if you just sit down and act inconspicuous, we won't notice or care. Edit, I mean moving up from an economy seat to a better economy seat. Don't plop down in business and first. Edit 2, I mean if you upgrade to an unoccupied seat. If you try to sit in a seat assigned to someone else, you will be either ass beat or asked to return to your assigned seat. I feel like your last suggestion is just asking for trouble. Don't just sit in a better seat if other people have to pay/get elite status for it. You will piss off those people, and they will probably ask a flight attendant to move you back. Never ever ever upgrade yourself to first/business class. Edit, some people think I'm being elitist by saying this. First off, yes, I'm being elitist to an extent. People paid a lot of money or flew a lot of miles to be up there. However, next time you think about upgrading yourself, ask yourself this. Would you walk out of a store with something you hadn't paid for and say, "Oh, I didn't know," when you got caught? Just started at an airline. There isn't as much CCTV as you may think. We can often be working 6 days in a row on minimum rest. Treat us nicely, please. Your plane is probably broken in some place, whether that be in the cabin or the aircraft itself. Edit, obviously if it's not safe, the aircraft won't take off, but small are often broken. We have to ask the captain to remove you from the flight if you're being an asshole. They will say yes. Even on the smaller aircraft, crew will find a place to sleep. Someone has probably thrown up on the floor by your seat. Someone has probably thrown up on the floor by your seat. We were on a bumpy approach, and just before landing my daughter decides she is going to puke. I didn't have time to grab the bag, so I panicked and caught most of it in my hands. I immediately jumped up to go to the bathroom when a fart told me I had to stay in my seat. I looked at her and said, "I'm holding vomit." At that point she became the most understanding person I have ever met. Thank God the stomach capacity of the average child is roughly equal to the liquid volume of a parent's cupped hands. There's really no problem with the left phalange. This plane doesn't even have a phalange. Jesus. This plane is missing its phalange. My late mom was a Delta stewardess for 33 years. She used to tell awesome PG stories. And I'm sure she had 100 more that were unfit for my innocent ears. Like any kid, I never really paid attention. But most of the ones I remember were about famous and slash or unk people. Or famous runk people. One common story was about the Delta miracles. Passengers in wheelchairs would board the plane before everyone else. But they had to wait for everyone else to disembark before they could get rolled out. It is apparently common for people to be healed during mid-flight and no longer need assistance when they reach their destination. Edit my apologies to the folks that have legit uses for one-way wheelchair trips. Let's meet in the middle and accept that there is indeed some humor to be seen here. Jesus. Those miracles happen all the time. I work on the ramp at a smaller airport and there can be 4 wheelchair assists expected, but not one of them take it. They use them at the bigger airport because it can be a very long walk and they get boarded first. Then when they get dropped off at the smaller airports they can walk all of a sudden. Lots of people can walk short distances, but can't do the huge amounts of standing around required to get through security and through a larger airport to board. Wheelchairs are not just for people who can't walk at all. If you have to pull a toilet paper in the toilet first, it won't smear. Works in regular toilets as well. Prevents poseidon's kisses from splashing back up your cheeks. 2. Cheeks. Yeah right. It's always a dead center bullseye for me. Edit. Yeah guys. I get how it works. Still sucks every time it happens. Not flight attendant, but former airport security. Clearly, the passengers don't know that joke they've just thought of we've heard about 5 million times. And the smile and laugh are fake all the way through. Also, the little jokes the personnel will tell you are more like stand-up than improv. We see the exact same situations thousands of times and all have our little jokes that are usually tried and proven by the end of the first 2 weeks of work. Edit. As people, guessing Americans, are all saying SAT isn't funny. I wasn't SAT. I worked for a private contractor in France, more specifically Orly Airport. Americans going through were always amazed at how it wasn't as tense as the US. I dunno. When the security agent put on his gloves and called me over for inspection, he started rubbing antibacterial solution on them as I'm walking towards him. I get there and put my luggage down. Rub my hands and say, awesome. Gonna have a great story to tell later. While motioning to start unbuttoning my pants. Security dude got a good laugh and told me not to worry, that it was not lube. I, on the other hand, left disappointed that there would be no story to tell after all. I think you just told a story, son. Probably like Louis C.K. said, that most people would freak out if they actually thought about what they were doing. To paraphrase, I mean, you're sitting in a chair in the sky. Everyone should be going hoo-oh-ah-ah-oh-ah, hang on. The entire time. This is why I love flying. I'm sighting. Sipping champagne. Looking out at the ground 30,000 feet below. Barreling along at 700 miles per hour. In an aluminum tube. Hey flight attendants, if I bring you a bag of candy will you upgrade me? Tomorrow's news. Passenger gave THC candy to flight attendants causing serious concern and policy changes. So they aren't cool with that. Good to know. I'm not a flight attendant, but I work the ramp. To elaborate on the body parts we send full bodies on planes at. Some in caskets, some not. Twice in the 7 years I've been doing this has fluid leaked out of the boxes the bodies are in and got all over the luggage. That is actually one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. Do not work the ramp. But I did. Human juice is not common. But leaky fish returning from coastal locations is almost guaranteed. That styrofoam cooler Joe Bob put his prize catch in? Yeah. It leaks. So does the plastic Walmart cooler. And the Coleman. There's only a few expensive coolers that won't leak when turned 90 or 180 degrees, and no one is paying attention to the this side up sticker when loading 200 bags. But even then, the fresh fish isn't as bad as the retch-inducing dried fish that people bring back from Africa and Asia in unbelievably hitty, crinkly plastic bags that they always overpack and fall apart the moment you try to pick them up. tearing and dumping their disgusting fish bomb all over everything. Ex-crew here. Few interesting tidbits I remember. Rubbish bags are referred to as gash bags. If you're on a short or mid-haul flight, then most airlines just have an hour or so turnaround for cleaning and security checks, and the same crew will then man the flight home. The cleaning on these turnarounds isn't too thorough. A quick mop and hoover is about it usually. Sometimes we went through with bug spray on certain routes. It was fairly common for people to leave phones, tablets, wallets etc. in seat pockets, which we would then find during security checks on turnaround. We can't take them back to the base airport due to security, so they get handed over to a dispatcher with paperwork. We've just got to hope the dispatcher doesn't pocket them. Don't leave dirty nappies. Use needles or anything else with bodily fluids in your seat pocket. You'd probably be surprised to find out how often this happens. Not only is it gross, but it's also a health hazard. That's not water on the floor in the bathroom. Put your bloody shoes back on. We know if you're having nookie in the bathroom. We can also open the doors easily from the outside. If we say there we are then, or see you next time, we might well be meaning to insult you. You get pissed quicker on board due to the air pressure, or something, and we don't tolerate drunken bullshit. It's not a bar. You don't just get thrown out by the bouncer. You get offloaded, and possibly even blacklisted. If you're clearly steaming before we've even taken off, then chances are you're not going to be going anywhere. Safety and security is the first priority on board. Your comfort and happiness is just an added bonus. You haven't seen bad turbulence unless the overhead lockers have opened and you have bags falling down on top of you. In the event of a decompression, you only have a few seconds before your brain starts being starved of oxygen. Get your oxygen mask on pronto. Do not inflate life jackets inside if the plane ditches in water. If the cabin starts to fill with water, you'll be unable to swim down to the exit. There's special straps in the cockpit and the chair moves back from the controller in case you need to tie the pilot up and move him away. We have fire axes and extremely heavy emergency equipment on board and are to stop you entering the cockpit by any means necessary. If you pay for extra legroom, then be aware that some of these seats are by uncrewed emergency exits. If you have a disability or require an extension seat belt, then we will have to move you for safety purposes. I crewed 737s and 757 aircrafts. Short to mid-haul. Economy only. We took our breaks, when we could, in the tiny little galleys at the front and back of the aircraft. If you see those curtains pulled, then please don't bother us unless it's actually an emergency. Another ear is not an emergency. None of these are probably that interesting. Edit. A few extras I thought I would add. I still remember the order of priorities in survival situations by pilots like wet fannies. Protection. Location. Water. Food. Colleagues of mine used to sell their stinky old used cabin shoes to foot fetishists on eBay. You can also sell your used, unwashed tights to any fellow crew out there. If you find yourself in an emergency situation where fire is present, whip off your nylon tights so your legs don't go up in flames. To any passengers out there, don't make the crew hate you. The farting thing mentioned in another comment is true. Oh man. The turbulence. I was on a flight into Colorado Springs one night. Anyone who has lived or flown to or from Colorado Springs knows about the absolute Bermuda Triangle levels of weirdness when it comes to weather, and we hit massive turbulence. It started falling down all over the place. People were screaming, and the flight attendants were strapped in doing the Hail Mary hit on repeat. The pilot came on and said, "Folks, we are going to circle the runway until an opportunity presents itself. Then make a run for it. Continue holding on tight. And if you have a god, now would be a great time to pray to him." That pilot had to have flown fighter jets in previous wars. Because despite the absolute insane turbulence, violent weather and zero visibility, he landed that bad without crashing. I personally thanked him as we were all leaving and told him he saved our lives. And we were extremely grateful. If you don't have a god, now would be a good time to get one. Literally going on an international flight tomorrow for the first time in 5 years. Not sure if reading this thread is a good idea. Bring a good pair of headphones. Don't eat any spicy food before the flight. Drink lots of water before the flight and use the restroom before boarding. I always pack my pajamas in my carry-on and change into them for the flight. Then go to the labs prior to landing to go back into street clothes. If it's a particularly long flight, ask the FARs if they have snacks. A Singapore FAR once gave me many Doritos and a Southern China FAR made cup noodles and put out mini sandwiches for the packs to take. Pro tip. The headrests bend on the left and right side, so you don't have to lean against the wall of the aircraft. They also move up and down to accommodate for height. If you're flying a 777 or an A380, most long-haul international flights are nowadays, get up and walk around. They have a few open spaces, and sitting in one spot for 12 hours isn't a good idea. That's all I've got. But there's plenty more. Source: I fly international quite a bit. I always travel in sweat pants, hoodie and sandals. I don't know why people dress up for long flights. Business people aside, you breeze through security, no belt. Shoes come off with ease, and you're super comfortable the whole flight.